It's time to engage your brain and enter the mind's eye on Z Talk Radio. I'm your host, Brian Turnov. It is January 27th, 2015. So happy that you're here and you can join me on our return to the airwaves for year 2. I know it's been a long holiday break, but trust me when I say the wait will be worth it. For the past 6 weeks, I have been putting some work in on the social media sites in celebration of our second year. So we started a brand new Twitter page. Check it out at Mind's Eye Show. The handle again is Mind's Eye Show. We also completely redesigned the homepage, themindsEyemedia.com, and don't forget to check out our Facebook page, facebook.com/Mind's Eye Show. It's all up there on the website, mindsEyemedia.com. The next 6 weeks is going to be a bumpy ride of cognitive dissonance. And we start tonight with the only remaining ancient wonder of the world, the ever-mysterious Great Pyramid. Our tour guide is Egyptian-born Robert Bauval, the acclaimed discoverer of the Orion correlation theory. He is author of several books, including the bestsellers The Orion Mystery and Message of the Sphinx. His discoveries had been the subject of several major TV documentaries on BBC, ABC, NBC, the Discovery Channel, and History Channel. Since 1993, Robert Bauval has been embroiled in many controversies involving the search for the lost treasures of the pyramid builders and the quest for the legendary Hall of Records of Atlantis. We're going to converse about his recently released, fully updated edition of Secret Chamber. Bauval is going to reveal the hidden agendas behind these events and raises important questions about the meaning of Egypt's ancient structures and the very origins of civilization. What lies behind the mysterious doors at the end of the star shafts in the Great Pyramid? What do the mysterious inscriptions found behind the Gantenbrink door mean? Is the Great Pyramid just a tomb, or does it actually serve a higher purpose involving a lost science? Answers to all this and more in less than a minute after this commercial break with Robert Bauval. Thanks so much for joining us today, Robert, on the Mind's Eye, all the way from Spain. It's such a beautiful country. I was there about 10 years ago, give or take a month. I absolutely loved it. It's one of my favorite places in the world. I'm just wondering, where in Spain are you located?
I'm in the south of Spain, on the Costa del Sol, which is the Andalusian coastline. And I presume you're in New York, are you?
Yes, I am. I'm sure it's a little bit nicer where you are right now. I'm looking at a literal blanket of snow right now.
Well, I'm going to make you very envious. I'm actually looking out of my office window because I live literally on the beach. I go down from my apartment, I cross the road, and I'm on the beach. And I'm looking there, and there's people sunbathing on the beach.
Oh, Robert,
it's a very nice sunny day in southern Spain. You're right. It's a beautiful country. I've moved here 6 years ago, but I've been coming here for the last 45 years. My brother has settled here in the early 60s, so we know the country very, very well, and I'm very, very happy here. It's a very easy life. Well, you've been here. It's very colorful. People are very friendly.
Oh, the people are the best.
Food is excellent.
And one of my favorite dishes is paella. But I've actually never been to the south of Spain. I've only been to, I guess, really Barcelona. That's the furthest south, I guess you can say, and that's not even south.
Well, it's kind of southwest actually. Southeast. We're in the extreme west. If you. Of Europe, not just of Spain.
Right.
We're literally, where I'm speaking to you from here, I'm about 100 miles from Gibraltar.
Okay.
Which is the tip of the Mediterranean.
Right, of course.
So it's as south as you can go, and in some spots, not from where I am looking here, but further up the coast, maybe another 30 kilometers further west, you can actually see Africa.
Oh, wow.
You literally see the mountains of Morocco.
You can't complain about that. And you know, on a day like this with the snow, it reminds me, I think it was either last year or maybe the year before that, where it actually snowed in Egypt. Do you remember that at all?
I wasn't there, but yes, they had a freak, very small snow fall, but it happened before actually.
Did it ever happen during your life?
Hello?
Did it ever happen during your life, or like did you ever actually witness that yourself at all? Or
no, I didn't witness a snowfall, but I did witness many times grail, ice balls falling. Surprisingly, they do.
Yeah.
These are very, very freaky. But it does. It's not totally impossible, and but not frequent. So this was rather unusual, and I've seen pictures. I presume you have too.
Yeah, the pictures are stunning.
Pyramid, yes.
Yeah, seeing the Great Pyramid covered by snow. It's just, I don't know, for some reason I just never thought I would actually see that in my lifetime, and then there it's just one of the most gorgeous things. I wonder if it might have ever snowed during the ancient Egyptian time.
Sorry?
I said I was just wondering. I would never thought I would see that in my lifetime. I wondered.
Well,
if...
you're just a spring chicken.
that's true. Well,
geological time. That's a fraction of a second.
Yes.
But I'm looking outside my window, and I'm looking eastwards, and I can see the town of Malaga, and behind the town is the Sierra Nevada. The Sierra Nevada are the tall mountains in Spain, and there is snow on the mountain peaks. So it's kind of weird here. I mean, I'm actually on the beach with people sunbathing, and as you look towards the mountains, you can actually see the snow. It's very bizarre.
It's an interesting juxtaposition.
Yeah, I mean, people go from where I live here with just an hour's drive, and they're skiing up the mountains. So it's the best of both worlds. Anyway, what can I tell you about the pyramids?
Well, first, before we get to the pyramids, I was just wondering a little bit about tourism. There's so much great archaeological news right now coming out of Egypt. It seems like every single week they're making this amazing discovery. But at the same time, I'm probably speaking for some of my listeners, I'm a bit afraid of the political climate. I've always wanted to visit Egypt. I'm wondering, how is putting those two together, how is the tourism right now?
But tourism right now is at its lowest, especially right now. I mean, like today. As you may have seen on the news, 2 days ago, on the 25th of January, they were supposed to be celebrating the 4th anniversary of the revolution, of the January Revolution. It turned into a disaster. There was many riots. Some 20 people got killed in the street. There's an uproar internationally because of the very severe repressive attitude of the police. Egypt is very unsettled. I mean, I cancelled the tour that I was going to do in March this year. I've postponed it to September, and the reason I've done so is that I did expect the kind of problems they're having in the last few days, and they're also going to have, well, it's not absolutely sure the dating, but I think next month they will have parliamentary elections, and this is another big hurdle for the authorities to go through, because there will certainly be a lot of protests.
Yes, of course.
I have to be frank. I mean, the revolution took place in 2011, as you know, and after that, I went many times. I actually took groups with me several times after the revolution. I took groups in a few months after the revolution. The last group I had was in September last year, so only a few months ago. But I would certainly not recommend it for the next few months. I would wait for the parliamentary elections to be over to see how the country reacts to a new government, because there will be a new government. There's going to be a reshuffling of the cabinet.
Of course.
And let's see. But I have to say that at the moment the prognosis isn't so good. The country is very polarized. The government is too heavy-handed on the opposition. They've completely taken a position to eliminate the opposition, which is mainly the Muslim Brotherhood. Not that I approve of the Muslim Brotherhood.
No, of course not, but still.
But it's going a bit too hard. I mean, thousands and thousands of people have been put in jail. The police is absolutely no tolerance whatsoever. They open fire on protesters. It's not good. It's not a good mood in Egypt at the moment. As for tourists, the truth is, yes, there hasn't been any problems with tourists. There was a group only a few weeks ago with Robert Schoch, who just returned, by the way. He's back in Boston. He told me it's fine. They didn't have any problems at all. The thing is, when a country is agitated like this, when you have people getting killed in the street, although that's not where the tourists go, you never know. And it's unfortunately been the case in Egypt over the last 30 or 40 years, that when the opposition is repressed so hard. Are you still there, Brian?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm just so fascinated that I'm hanging on every word here.
Well, when the opposition in Egypt, which is, like I said, mainly the Muslim Brotherhood, although for 60 years they've oppressed every other political party.
Yes, of course.
Egypt has run on a one-party only basis for the last 60 years. But whenever the opposition is repressed very hard, it goes underground. It tries to cause problems, and unfortunately, they get attention when they take action against foreigners. As somebody said the other day on television, you know, you have 100 people getting killed in Syria every day, and nobody says anything, but one American gets killed in New York, and it's all over the news.
Yeah. So
that is the unfortunate thing. So what I'm saying is that at the moment, I wouldn't be surprised. I hope it doesn't happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if the opposition is so frustrated that they begin to do this kind of action by drawing attention to their problem by attacking tourists.
You know,
I have to speak the truth here, and I would not recommend anybody to go for the next few months at least, till the parliamentary elections are over, until we see how the country stabilizes.
Yeah,
I have advertised, by the way, a tour for September. I'm keeping this open, assuming that things will stabilize by this summer. But at the moment, my answer is don't go to Egypt.
Okay, so delay it for a little bit. Well, you know what? I really appreciate your honesty, especially because, you know, like you said, you do tour guides there, and you could easily just tell people, you know, I'm open anytime. But, you know, you really gave us the truth of the matter, and quite frankly, I think that's what most people were probably thinking too.
I have a vested interest to take people to Egypt.
Exactly. So when you're telling us not to come, it tells you.
I would not. Yeah, I'm being honest because first, I don't feel comfortable taking people and telling them that everything is okay, and it is not. And I have to say, like I said a little earlier, that nothing happened. But you know, it's one of those things. It's Murphy's Law. You know, I would hate something happening on a tour that I'm responsible. And it is. Well, you know, all you have to do is look at the news. It is a country that is extremely polarized, very agitated. People are very angry in the opposition, and when you have a situation like this, you never know. I mean, I have friends in Egypt who are very, very concerned because it can happen anywhere.
Yeah.
You know, it can happen anytime, anywhere. So it's better to wait. Having said this,
with the big but, of course.
No, the big but is that Egyptians, on the whole, are very nice people.
Well, I was just about to say that, actually. I was just going to say that Egyptians are some of the most warming, welcoming people that I've ever met. I'm very good friends with a bunch. I mean, you have been unbelievable over the past couple of weeks, and it's such a shame that these people can't show off this country that's so important to our history.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, I've lived 30 years in Egypt. Hold on a second, I'll have to shut down something here.
Okay, yeah, take your time, please.
Yeah, just a moment while we're chatting.
We can always delete this little part too, so we're not too worried here.
They keep trying to contact me on.
Well, you're a wanted man, Robert. That's a good. I think that's a good problem, right?
Probably more wanted than you imagine. Okay. You know, what I was saying is that, you know, I've lived 40 years in Egypt on and off. I was born there, as you know, and I have to say, because I've lived in so many countries. I've lived in Saudi Arabia and worked. I mean, I lived and worked in countries. I lived in Iran in the days of the Shah. I've lived in Sudan and many countries in Africa. I've even lived in Australia for many years. So I have to say that of all the countries I've lived in, the friendliest people I've met, and it's the truth, are the Egyptians. They're extremely friendly. They're extremely hospitable. I mean, it's kind of even spooky. You know, you're liable to walk in the streets in Egypt or in a village, and you'd be surprised. People invite you in their homes, you know, offer you tea, and they're very, very hospitable. But they're also extremely influenced by propaganda. It's not their fault, really. They've been subjected to severe propaganda over the last 60 years.
Yeah, it's a generational thing now.
And they can easily be swayed into directions that causes the kind of violence we've been seeing. So, having said this, you know, I'm telling you the truth. I think that the best advice to anybody who's thinking of going to Egypt, it's a wonderful country. It's a dream come true if you go there, because it's got probably the best antiquities you can imagine in the world, the pyramids, the temples. It's really great, but it's not the time.
It's going to have to hold off on a little bit, and it's, like we said, it's such a shame because it's so important to our history. And as a boy, I've always had a fascination with Egypt, and you know, I just, for whatever reason, I've always been drawn to the pyramids. In elementary school, primary school, I couldn't really wait to dive into the mysteries of Egypt, and even then I knew something was just a little bit off of what they were telling us. So I've always wanted that chance to visit. So today you're kind of going to act as our tour guide, in a sense, our digital tour guide for those who maybe are going to have to delay our trips to Egypt for a little bit of time. Tell me what it's like, Robert, to look up at the Great Pyramid and then to step inside. What is the feeling that you get when you get in there? Just describe it for me. I've always wanted to know that feeling, to feel it.
You're asking somebody who's been there. I've lost count. Certainly a few hundred times. So I don't want to seem a bit sort of blasé. But let me tell you the impression that always sticks in my mind. Because I decided in 2005, I was living in England at the time. I had a house in England. And I decided with my wife to go and spend some time in Egypt, to write a book which is titled The Egypt Code. I decided to write it on location. And I had a friend of mine who owned a block of flats, a building, literally opposite the Great Pyramid.
Oh.
I mean, it was incredible. I mean, absolutely incredible. And he had the 4th floor free, and I had a frontal view, literally a frontal view, of the 2 large pyramids of Giza. I couldn't see the 3rd one. It was a little bit hidden by the large one, but they were literally there. I mean, you got this impression you could reach out and almost touch it. And I'll tell you something that is very bizarre. That describes the kind of effect that this monument can have on you. I realized, because we stayed 3 years there, I saw the pyramids in the morning, at dawn, at sunset, midday, in winter, in summer.
Yeah, you're spoiled.
Yeah, I mean, literally. But I can tell you one thing. I began to realize, after a year of being there, and I had seen the pyramids before, of course, but being there, literally, stepping out of my balcony and seeing them every morning all the time. I realized that after a year, I found myself not looking at them. And I was there with my wife, and I commented. I said, something's very funny. You realize we're not looking at the monuments anymore. And it occurred to me that everybody in the area who lived there, taxi drivers, sellers, shop owners, when you looked at them, they were walking in the streets, the pyramids were in full sight, but they didn't look at them. And the answer came in my mind like an epiphany. It's because every time you look at them, they disturb you. They literally disturb you. They force those unanswerable questions. Who put it there? Why is it there? How old it is? Who built it? How was it built? And you spend the rest of the day with these thoughts in your mind. So after a while, you try and avoid this because it literally stirs you up.
Yeah, it gives
and
you.
That is probably why.
It gives you a bit of cognitive dissonance, so to speak.
Exactly, and this is why a lot of people are attracted, like you, for example, who say that although you haven't been in Egypt, because it does touch something like no other monument, by the way. Well, I would say another monument because I'm writing a book about this, the Sphinx. I mean, the Sphinx is something else.
That's a whole nother subject.
Well, there's nothing like it. I mean, there's nothing like the Great Pyramid, and there's nothing like the Sphinx. I mean, and coming back to the Great Pyramid, what you also feel, and it depends on what foot you've got out of bed, as we say in French, in what mood you're in. But you often feel, as you look at it, that it shouldn't be there. It should be there. It's just so out of place. It's so large. It's so there. It doesn't resemble anything that is around you. It towers over the whole buildings around you. It is anonymous. This is another thing about the pyramid. It is totally anonymous. It doesn't have inscriptions. It's as if, and I don't want to say the word, but I'll say it. It's as if it's alien. It's something that just landed there. And it has this effect on you. And of course, if you get the chance to go there and see it yourself, it will be stuck in your mind. I'll tell you something else that the late Professor Edwards, whom I had the great fortune of knowing him before he died, he was considered and still considered one of the main authorities on Egyptian pyramids. Mm-hmm. He was the curator of the Egyptian department of the British Museum. Anyway, he told me something rather strange. He said, because he had been studying and working and excavating around the pyramids for 70 years. I mean, he knew this monument. And he said something rather odd to me. He said, you know what? And he was about 80 years old when he said this. He said, I've come to the conclusion that there's a little pyramid in everybody's brain. Because it's a monument that has this effect. You mentioned the word pyramid, and suddenly, it rings a bell. Mystery, all these questions about the past and who are we and is there life after death? That's all the big questions start stirring up. So there you are. I've given you my impression.
And I have that same impression too. And there's just so many mysteries. The Great Pyramid itself, everything about it almost is confounding. It's so hard to wrap your head around. And we're going to talk about these mysteries that you talked about in your book, Secret Chamber Revisited. And I guess you said that, for lack of better words, that it's kind of alien in a sense, the Great Pyramid. I don't think you maybe agree with that it was actually built by aliens, but do you agree with the traditional interpretation that the Egyptians were the ones that built it?
Okay, first, number one is no, I don't believe that it's built by aliens. I don't believe anything's built by aliens. I couldn't
agree with you more. And it's almost disrespectful.
I hope my readers don't get disappointed, but I use the word alien because it is alien in the sense that we don't know anything about it. And by saying it is the Egyptians who built it, this again is a misnomer. We don't know who was there. Now, the word Egyptian is a very modern word, by the way. It was coined by the Greeks.
Right.
the Egyptians who lived in Egypt at the time of the pyramids didn't call themselves Egyptians. They called themselves the Kemetians, for example, people of the Black Land, and various other names. Who were these Egyptians? Where did they originate from? These are the big questions. And I've written a book with my colleague Thomas Brophy, the astrophysicist, called Black Genesis, where the consensus now, not just with alternative researchers, but with most of Egyptologists, is that the Egyptian civilization had a proto-civilization, that there was something else before it. And we've identified a prehistoric people long before the pharaonic civilization that lived in the western desert of Egypt, which is the eastern part of the Sahara. There's no doubt about that. The artifacts have been found, even drawings of themselves have been found in caves. Egyptologists agree now that these people, these prehistoric people, are the ones that migrated eventually into the Nile Valley when the desert became super arid, because there was a time when the desert was a savanna,
right,
because of climatic conditions, and brought with them a knowledge, certainly a knowledge of astronomy, because I don't want to go into too much detail there, but these desert people, these desert nomads, had lived in the open, wide Sahara for thousands of years, and had learned how to navigate, literally how to navigate like one navigates in the sea. They used the stars. They also, we have evidence of them building with large stones. And we also have evidence of them domesticating cattle. So it looks like these people came in with a cargo of knowledge and literally kick-started the pharaonic civilization. There's a lot of argument about this. I don't want to go into the pros and cons, but it's picking up a lot of support. And so we now have to say that there's a huge question mark as to who were the original Egyptians, and where does the idea of pyramids and all the temple, all the construction you see in the early stage of the pharaonic civilization, where does it come from? Now, one of the peculiarities about the sites that we found in the Sahara belonging to this prehistoric people. Are you still there, Brian?
Oh yes. I'm.
You have to sort of make a noise, because sometimes we got cut off and I'm on for about an hour.
I know. It's just so fascinating. History is my subject, and when you tell me about this prototype civilization, I'm literally hanging on every word right now. But I'll make a peep every so often, so you know I'm alive.
Yeah. Well, we'll give them a name, because we really have no idea who they are. As you probably know, but let me just briefly say this, that something happened 200,000 years ago in Central Africa.
What do you mean by that?
Southeast. Well, what I mean by that is that something happened, and that something changed the early humanoids into Homo sapiens,
right?
We are ourselves. We don't know what it is. There's been a gigantic mutation. This is a huge question that science has not been able to resolve.
Right, part of the missing link.
Yes, call it the missing link, but a huge mutation that happened, and that a woman gave birth to the first Homo sapien, the first modern man, if you like, or modern woman. And it is from that origin that every single human being on this planet comes from. So we know the source. What we have discovered is that, strange enough, as strange as it may seem, there was only a very small group, probably about 150, 200, that started moving out of Central Africa at about 60,000 years ago.
Right.
And they probably moved up the Nile into the Levant, crossed into what is now Europe, and eventually populated the rest of the planet. And this is where all of us come from. But of course, there remained a contingency in Africa, which populated the whole African continent. We've detected another group that moved not to the Nile, but moved into what is now modern Chad, into the mountains there, probably because it was very fertile and very inviting. They stayed there for quite a long time. We're throwing a figure here, but probably around 30,000 years ago, and then eventually moved down into the sub-Sahara, into what is now the Sahara, which was fertile. And these are the people we're talking about. We don't know exactly who they are, but we know how they look like, because they left us drawings in caves. They were very tall, they were very black, they looked like a bit like the Maasai that you find in Kenya today. And we know a lot about them, even though they haven't left us writing, because they left drawings in caves. We know that they had domesticated cattle, that they were fairly sophisticated, and eventually they started moving all over the Sahara. The Sahara started becoming super arid because of climatic changes around 6000 BC. And this is the reason why they had to learn how to navigate, because they had to move their cattle literally from one water source into finding water. Now, what was happening at the time? Can I go on this, by the way?
Oh no! Oh, please do. It's so important to. It's like you said, it's the prototype, so it leads up to everything that we're talking about.
Yes, because one of the problems by studying ancient Egypt is that it's become a habit with Egyptologists and everybody who reads about ancient Egypt to stop at what we call the first dynasty. It's as if nothing happened before. But as we now are realizing, there was a lot of it happening before. I mean, the Egyptian civilization didn't just spring out of nothing.
Right, exactly.
You read in books, the first dynasty and then on and on. Well, there was a lot of activity before, and we need to get into that to understand not only where these people come from, but what promoted these things that we see, like pyramids and temples and so forth. So anyway, I'll make it as brief as possible. These people who lived in the Sahara had to move their cattle from water well to water well. What was happening at the time was that the climate was such that the monsoons that still occur in Central Africa, but do not reach Egypt today, would reach the southern part of Egypt and would discharge water, huge rains, forming temporary lakes. But these temporary lakes will only last a few months and then would seep into the desert. Some lakes stayed longer than others, and this is why these people had to move from lake to lake. But to move in the Sahara, which is an enormous place, you have to know how to navigate. You have to know where you're going, otherwise you really get lost.
Yeah.
And the danger is not only to know where you're going, but when to go. In other words, you can go in a place and know where it is, but if you don't find water there, i.e. if you arrive too late, that the water has dried up, that's it. You're in mortal danger.
Yeah, you're screwed.
So you have to be able to time your trip. And this is where the stars come into play. We know that these people in the prehistoric Sahara that eventually populated Egypt were not just excellent navigators. They knew how to use the stars to time. In other words, to have calendars. And this is very, very interesting, because this is at the very roots of Egyptian ideologies, of pharaonic ideologies, that we know that the pharaohs, the very early pharaohs, and throughout the pharaonic civilization, had developed what we would call today a sky religion. A religion that observed the activities of the sky. Egyptians had developed calendars before any other civilization had. They were adepts astronomers, and they probably inherited, almost certainly inherited this from these newcomers, these early comers that came from the Sahara. So this is the foundation, if you like. So to go in a very roundabout way to tell you why we're saying aliens, is because the likelihood is that yes, it is people who were in the Nile Valley who built those pyramids, or instigated the ideas, who kick-started the ideas that led to pyramid building, but we don't know where they came from. We don't know exactly who they are. So I'm using the word alien in that respect, and I cannot. It's wrong to use the word Egyptians, because there were no Egyptians at the time. There were people living in the Nile Valley. There were these probably hunter-gatherers at the time who mingled with these newcomers, these black prehistoric people, and eventually created the pharaonic race. So that's the way we're looking at it now. And going back to the pyramids, as you probably know from my books, I hope,
Yes.
that many of us and when I use the word us, I'm including people like Graham Hancock, John West, Robert Schoch, Thomas Brophy. I'm actually writing a book now with Dr. Schoch. We just started a book called Sphinx, because we're going to review again all the arguments that have been discussed over the last 25 years, because much new evidence has come into light, and re-presenting the case for a very early phase in Egyptian, or let's call it Egyptian for lack of better words, in Egyptian history that goes long before the pharaohs. And the proof of all this, which we will put in the books, but we've already discussed in other books, is at Giza, is at the Sphinx, and where the pyramids stand. So there you are. You can ask me some questions about this.
Well, I just want to say that, to me, I look like you and Dr. Schoch. You guys are the real scientists. You're letting the information, whatever you find, take you to where it's taking you. You're following the information, as opposed to so many Egyptologists where they say, this is the information I learned, there's nothing else that you could present that's going to change my mind. But in reality, isn't that what science is all about? Every time you're presented with new information, you then have to readjust your perspective on what you know to fit that information into it, so it makes sense. And I think that's what you guys are doing, and I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you, but let me say this. I mean, I'm not a scientist as such.
Right, not in the...
I'm a construction engineer who, for the last 30 years or so, I've taken a great interest and studies in ancient Egypt, and particularly ancient astronomy. Having said this, I was trained as a construction engineer to think in very pragmatic terms. I mean, I don't accept arguments by authority, for example, which is one of the big problems with classical Egyptology.
Yep.
If you read an Egyptological book, you'll find that one Egyptologist quotes another, and one quotes the other, and eventually what is a suggestion or a theory becomes a fact.
Yep.
Because it's repeated and repeated and repeated. I'm dealing with this problem this time with the book I'm writing with Schoch, because Robert Schoch and I have decided, and incidentally also Graham Hancock, I'm in on almost daily dialogue with Graham Hancock, because he's writing the sequel to Fingerprints of the Gods.
Oh, wonderful.
Which, yes, it's going to be published very soon. And because we've been colleagues for such a long time, we're kind of cross-checking information, and we all have arrived at this point where we are going to really look at the evidence the way it should be looked at, with no bias, with no arguments of authority. Just look at the evidence the way it is. And what's obvious to us, because we've been studying this for such a long time, is that very often things that are taken for fact or are cited as fact are not. They're merely statements that probably good academic guesses, perhaps, but nonetheless not fact. And you find that this is a lot, happens a lot in Egyptology. I'll give you one example.
Please.
I'll give you one example. I mean, it's repeated ad nauseum by Egyptologists these days, and for the last 20 years, that the Sphinx is in the image of the pharaoh Khafra. That Khafra, the builder of the second pyramid of the 4th dynasty, built the Sphinx and the temples that are adjacent to the Sphinx. Well, I can tell you, there's no shred of evidence to support this. It's the only evidence they have is because the Sphinx happens to be more or less in alignment with the second pyramid. In other words, when you're gazing at the Sphinx, about 700-800 meters further west stands the second pyramid. But that's not proof. That's not evidence.
That's an assumption, is what it is. Assuming
well,
assuming the relationship there.
So the way we're looking at this now, and we have before, but this time we really want to get to the bottom of this. For example, I give you one very good example that I've been discussing over the last few days with Graham Hancock.
What's that?
It's been repeated. Now there is. I'll give you a picture because you haven't been there, but there is. You've got to visualize this. As you approach the Giza necropolis from the east, you're confronted by the Sphinx. The Sphinx is right there. And behind the Sphinx,
I see it in my head.
about 6, 7 other pyramids. Okay.
I'm seeing it in my head.
That's the vision. Sorry.
I said, yeah, I'm picturing, not only picturing it in my head, but I also have your book next to me, so that helps too.
Okay. Well, in front of the Sphinx are 2 temples. One right in front of it, known as the Sphinx Temple, and one a bit on the side, on the left side, as you're facing the Sphinx, the so-called Valley Temple. All right. So this is the scenario you have in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been discussing the Valley Temple with Graham Hancock over the last few days, and by the way, with the Egyptologist David Rowe, who happens to live in Spain as well. We're very good buddies. We talk practically on a daily basis on Skype these days, all of us.
Wonderful.
So I'm very pleased with the invention of Skype, because we have these kind of group talks, you know.
Yeah, well, after our little issue, but yeah, for those for you it normally works, but
no, it's great stuff, because
it's the best.
Before it was a problem. Now we kind of put ourselves on a conference call, and we exchange and change documents. Anyway,
yes.
The point is this. Graham contacted me a few days ago, and it so happens that we're both, although independently, he's writing the sequel of Fingerprints of the Gods, and I'm writing Sphinx with Robert Shaw, but it so happens, independently and by luck, that we're both studying at the moment this Valley Temple of the Sphinx. And he called me up, and he asked me a few questions about the Sphinx that he had been out of touch, and I told him about I was dealing with some inscriptions that are found on the stele there and so forth. But then he contacted me and said, "Listen, Robert, have you ever heard of the name of Khafra inscribed on the Valley Temple?" And I said, "No." He said, "But look, I've got an article here on the internet by Zahi Hawass." You know who Zahi Hawass is?
Of course. How can we not?
And he says that there is the name of the king and his titles on the Valley Temple. I said, "No, there isn't, as far as I know." So look, I'll send you the article, have a look. You know, and I read the part where he talks about this, and I said, wait a minute. The wording is very familiar to me. He's quoting from somebody else. The actual inscriptions, there are inscriptions. There are inscriptions.
What do they say?
As you face the Valley Temple, there are 2 entrances to this temple. One on your left and one on your right. On the gates of these temples are indeed inscriptions. On one of the gates it is written, "Beloved of the goddess Hathor," and on the other gate is written, "Beloved of the goddess Bastet." She was a lion. But no name of Khafra. However, that's what Hawass says. Now, I said, wait a minute, it rings a bell, I've seen it somewhere, and I remember that I had seen it, this phrase, the exact word by word, it was actually literally copied by Hawass in a book that was written in 1947 by Professor Ivan Edwards, who I was speaking earlier about.
Of course, yes.
One of the big authorities in Egyptology. And in this book he says, exactly, word by word, what Hawass had copied. So I thought, this is peculiar, because I know that, yes, there are the words beloved of the goddess Hathor, beloved of Bastet, but there isn't the name of Khafra. So I thought, wait a minute, let me check Professor Edwards' last edition, which was in 1993, a few years before he died. And in that edition, he then corrects himself. He says, the name of the king is assumed to be there. In other words, that they assumed the name of Khafra was there because it might have been part of a title, i.e. Khafra, beloved of the goddess. But it's not there. It's not there. It's a fact. And it's wrong to say that it's there. But it's been repeated so many times because Professor Edwards had quoted it in 1947 and didn't make himself clear. It's become a fact. So believe me, we spent 3 days looking at all the publications, all the documents, photographs, to finally conclude that it's not there. But it's been repeated. If you go on the internet, you'll be surprised how many people repeat it. In articles, it's been repeated on documentaries. So it's one of those things that you have to be extremely careful. And that is what we've learned how to do over the last 30 years of experience. That you have to go to the primary source, especially with Egyptology. I'll give you, since we're on the topic, can I give you another example, which is flagrant?
No, of course, please.
Well, I want to give you two, because that makes the point very strongly. There is a pyramid in the very, about 60 kilometers south of the Giza necropolis. It's known as the Meidun Pyramid. And some people call it the rhomboidal pyramid, because the covering has collapsed. It looks like a strange cube sticking out of the ground.
Okay.
Now here's the story behind this one. There are two pyramids closer to Giza at Dashur. Two huge pyramids built by the pharaoh Sneferu. The pharaoh Sneferu was the father of King Cheops, King Khufu, who built the Great Pyramid. There are two pyramids there, and Egyptologists have been in confusion as to how and why would a pharaoh want to build two pyramids for himself. It didn't make much sense.
Yeah, it doesn't really go with most of the timeline.
He could not escape the fact that evidence on the site says that he built two pyramids. So the way to get around it, and this is typically of Egyptologists, they said, wait a minute, we'll assume that he built one for his body and the other one for his spirit. Well, okay, fair enough. I mean, you can go.
I can see it. I can see why they would say that. I can see it.
Okay, but let me tell you what happened afterwards. Is that other pyramid further south, the rhomboidal pyramid of Meidun? Well, bad luck for Egyptologists. There is evidence there too that Sneferu built this pyramid. So now they were in real trouble because they could explain more or less two pyramids for this pharaoh at Dashur, but how about the third one?
Yeah, what does that mean?
So they came up, and that was Professor Edwards, by the way. They came up with another solution. They said, okay, the evidence is there, that we can't deny it. He also was involved with this pyramid. What we're going to say is that he started this pyramid. No, this pyramid was started by his father, a pharaoh called Huni, who we know nothing about. All we know is that he existed. We have his name carved somewhere on a block, very far away. But we'll give him this pyramid. We'll say that he built this pyramid, and because there is the evidence of Sneferu, his son, we'll say that his son then completed it for him. That's how we can explain the third one. It was a very bold and far-fetched theory, but let me tell you one thing. Now you go on the site of the pyramid of the rhomboidal pyramid, and you'll see a plaque that says this is the pyramid of Huni built on such a day and such a date. And the man who started this theory, Professor Edwards, was furious because he said, no, it's not a fact.
It's just a theory.
Yes, and in fact it's a very, very loose theory because there's no evidence at all of the pharaoh Huni on this particular site. So this is the problem, and I'm glad you give me a chance to talk about this, because this is how we now approach our books. And my book with Robert Schock will come out next year, by the way, because we want time to do it properly, where we're going to examine all these problems. The way we're dealing with this book is, because I've been trained for this as well. I used to be a commercial engineer dealing with arbitration. The way we're dealing it is we're putting Egyptology on the stand here. You know, we want to look at every piece of evidence that either is wrong to consider it as factual evidence, and see eventually, when we look at all this, when we present the evidence for and against, then we let the reader decide as a jury, well, are Egyptologists right to allocate these monuments, the Sphinx and its temples, to the Pharaoh Khafra, or are we looking at something else? And that something else, let me tell you, the evidence is overwhelming now, that it is a much, much older site. Much, much older site. And Schock and I are not afraid at all to go into a very distant epoch. We have very strong evidence to support this. So this is of course, you know, we've written a lot about this already, but this time we're going to use to coin the phrase, which I've mentioned in the introduction of the book. We're going to nail the last nail on that coffin. Well, it's been 25 years that this thing has been debated, and we're not being nice to Egyptologists, I can tell you.
And I don't think they expect it to either for some reason. So.
Well, look.
Not that you're not being nice. You're just presenting the information that you've gathered.
No, I'll be honest.
Oh, okay. Well then, I was trying to be politically correct for you.
We've donated a lot. I mean, believe me, Shock and I, and Graham as well. But Shock and I have been called all sorts of names.
Oh yes.
I mean, they took it too far with us. I mean, you name it, I've been called by Egyptologists, and I've stood, quite calm about this. But I was called a charlatan, an adventurer, a Zionist.
And those are the nice words.
Oh, those big words,
And those are the nice things they said.
And now, slowly, some of my theories are actually being usurped. Like, you'll find them in Egyptological books. And Shock and I, although he's an academic, as you know,
right?
But Shock and I have said enough's enough. I mean, we'll remove the white gloves here, and we'll have to really have a proper investigation here. And it's enough of these niceties. We really have to get to the bottom of this issue, because this is the big problem. Because of this unending debate, and because of the way that Egyptologists have appropriated themselves of these of this subject, there is a huge fallacy that is being promulgated in our history, and it's important, because, to coin a phrase of Graham Hancock, we're a species with amnesia. We don't know who we are. It's the truth. We have no idea who we are, and therefore it's vitally important that we understand the origins of our civilization. And if there is this fallacy, this misunderstanding of what it is, then we are living in delusion. We need to understand what this, and Giza is the key. I'm very, very sure Giza is the key, because I don't have much time to go into that now, but from my previous books, and we will go into it in this new book in much more detail, that the design of this place is unquestionably, hello?
Yes, oh yes, it's unquestionably, we're going to say.
It's unquestionably the case that whoever designed it, whoever planned this site, was using two sciences: the science of astronomy and the science of mathematics. There is no doubt at all. And of course the science of engineering, to build them. But behind the building is the planning and the conception of this project, and there is no doubt at all, because once you examine this site, it is riddled with astronomical quality. There is astronomical alignments, there is astronomical symbolism, there is precision to a degree that it demands the investigator to consider astronomy very seriously. And mathematics. The pyramid is designed on a mathematical code. I wish you were going to ask me.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. Is that it's pretty clear that astronomy and mathematics were extremely significant and important within the culture, and particularly in the building of it. Let's talk about some of those mysteries, because, like you said, when you go inside, there's a lot of evidence, even physical evidence, that math is utterly important in the building of it. So let's talk about some of that. Some of those aspects.
Let me dispense very quickly about the astronomy. I mean, the pyramid is precisely aligned to the cardinal points
and your Orion correlation theory. So talk about that, because obviously that's incorporated in.
Very briefly, because
please.
I don't want to go too much into that now. But the pyramid, the Great Pyramid, and all pyramids, but particularly the Great Pyramid, has a precision of astronomical alignment that is even today astounding. It is precisely aligned to the cardinal direction within a minute fraction of a single degree. To achieve this kind, hello?
Oh yes, yeah. To
achieve this kind of perfection, precision, with this size monument, when we attribute to these people the lack of knowledge of the wheel, the lack of knowledge of the pulley, the lack of optical instruments, the lack of any lifting machine,
which is a joke,
the lack of metals, just copper. It is astounding. And to an engineer, it is baffling. We have no idea how it can be done without optical instruments, without lifting devices, without the kind of instruments that we use today to get that kind of precision on a monument. So having said this, the pyramid begs to be understood through astronomy. But, and we were talking earlier, I mean, entering the Great Pyramid. You know, we're in the 21st century now. I mean, we sent people, well, we've already sent people several times on the moon. We're about to send them to Mars.
Right, yeah.
But we don't know, when you go at the pyramid, you cannot, I mean, to this day, on the 21st century, and engineers have examined it, scholars of all kinds, architects, archaeologists, artists, you name it. It's a monument that's been examined and studied by everybody, and nobody can explain the interior design of this monument. It is baffling. You go in there, and it simply doesn't.
It makes no sense.
But you can,
it doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, obviously they had to build it from the inside out, but even building it from the inside out, how do they build those relief chambers? Talk about those, because those are, it's really hard to wrap around the inside.
It doesn't, you know, you're completely perplexed.
It's so hard to wrap your head around it.
The precision, but when you enter the pyramid and you go up the ascending corridors, it's bizarre. It's bizarre because you're climbing. Let me give you a ride into the pyramid.
Yeah. Be our tour guide for a moment.
Yes, you will enter now the pyramid from not from its original entrance because it's blocked. You enter from a hole that was dug in the 9th century by the Arabs, and to reach the ascending passage. When you reach that point, you're about to climb on an incline of about 26 degrees, a very low passage. You actually have to crouch almost on your knees, and you're going to climb and climb and climb and climb.
Uncomfortable.
About 50 meters or so. It's like climbing the Empire State Building.
Wow.
And you reach the foot of the Grand Gallery, and suddenly you stand up, and you're in this strange world where there is the Grand Gallery ahead of you. Let me describe it. It's about 7 meters high. It is corbelled, so it's kind of like a triangle in cross section. You can't see the end of it because it's so far and so dark. You know, it looks like it's heading towards nowhere, into the abyss of the night. You climb up the Grand Gallery. Finally, you reach the top, and again you're confronted with a narrow tunnel. You go through this narrow tunnel, and you emerge in the King's Chamber, and there you're flabbergasted. I tell you, every time I go there, you're flabbergasted because the first thing that strikes you is that it's bare. It's absolutely bare. There's only this sarcophagus, totally unmarked, that is on the side of the room, on the west side. There's nothing inscribed, nothing, and it's this bareness that gets you. You can't explain why this huge structure has been built with such perfection, and you're in a room that is solid granite, by the way. It's built by blocks that were imported from Upper Egypt, about 600 miles upriver.
That's a whole nother story.
Yes. And these blocks, by the way, on average weigh about 60 tons. And they're absolutely perfectly jointed together. You can't even put a razor blade between them. And that's what gets you. It doesn't look primitive. It looks like it was built yesterday. It's one of those strange feelings.
And it would be difficult for us to build something like that too.
Not only it would be very hard, we wouldn't want to build it because it doesn't seem to make sense when you want to do this. There must be a reason, but you can't find the reason. And this is what I was telling you earlier. It kind of stimulates your mind. It's provocative. It's like being asked a riddle that you can't find the answer, and it is disturbing because your mind wants to know. You know, you're in this monument, and you see,
It yearns for
I'm
it.
in the middle of a gigantic puzzle. I'm in the middle of a giant question mark. I'm in the middle of this mystery, and I can't fathom it. I can't understand it. It's the only way I can explain it. And this gets you all the time. And believe me, I've taken people inside the Great Pyramid dozens and dozens of times, and you get this reaction.
Yeah, I can't even imagine.
Having said this, let's look at the structure. And you were mentioning the relief chambers. When you look at the ceiling of the King's Chamber, when you look at the ceiling, you will look at a granite ceiling made of 7 beams that span the width of the room, about 6 meters span. They each weigh about 70 to 80 tons apiece. Now let me tell you, this is a big beam. There's 9 of them.
It makes no sense.
Each one of them, if you can imagine taking about 150 family cars and squishing them together, you get one of these beams.
Unbelievable.
So it is absolutely stunning how they brought these beams down there, how they lifted them in position, and putting them in such perfect jointing together. Now, if that wasn't enough,
there's more.
There is 5 other so-called relief chambers above this ceiling, with each of them 9 beams, similar beams.
Same exact thing.
Yes, there's 43 of these beams. 43 of these beams. Collectively, they weigh 2,000 tons of solid granite. We have no idea why they wanted to do this. It doesn't logically make sense.
It really doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
And of course, Egyptologists have jumped to the wrong conclusion that they're supposed to relieve the weight of the pyramid above on the chamber. But it does quite the opposite.
I was going to say, it does the opposite from what you said in the book.
Well, the last thing you want to do is put that kind of weight on the walls of the chamber. 2,000 tons of solid granite.
It makes no sense unless it had a purpose. There has to be a purpose there.
There's no doubt it has a purpose. But what is strange about these relief chambers, because now I know you've read the book, is that they were unknown until 1837.
Yeah, the discoveries themselves are fascinating. Talk about how they were discovered, because that in itself is fascinating.
Well, again, I'll be brief because we're going to run out of time.
Yeah, we only got so much time.
They were discovered in 1837 by a British explorer called Colonel Howard Weiss, who had heard, and indeed it was known long before him, that there was a chamber, a very low chamber, above the King's Chamber, which today we call the first relief chamber. The first person to speak about this chamber was an Englishman. I don't know why it's always Englishman, but it was an Englishman called Davison, who entered this chamber in 1763, about 80 years before Howard Weiss. So Howard Weiss knew that. To enter, let me explain how you enter these chambers. I've never been there because it's very, very dangerous, by the way. You're at the top of the Grand Gallery. The roof of the Grand Gallery is 7 meters high. You have to get yourself a ladder for a start. Climb up this ladder, and on the wall, right at the top, there is a little opening, a very narrow tunnel. You have to be able to make your way into this tunnel from the ladder. It's very tricky. Crawl through this tunnel, which is about 30 or 20 feet long, and you emerge into this Davison chamber, the first relief chamber. And that's what Howard Weiss did in 1857. Suspecting that there may be other chambers above, he tried to drill into the granite of Davison chamber, on the ceiling, on the granite ceiling, but he couldn't do it. It's very, very hard stone.
Yeah, especially at that time.
And eventually he decided to use gunpowder. He blasted gunpowder through, and he discovered the other 4 chambers above. They were completely sealed, like a hermetic can, if you like. Nobody had been in them since the building of this pyramid. So whatever you were going to find in there was absolutely sure that it belonged to the time of the construction of the pyramid.
You could date it, right?
That's what makes this chamber very interesting, because clearly they were intended not to be seen. Clearly they were intended to be sealed. Sorry? Hello?
Oh, yes, yeah, they were intended to be sealed.
Yeah, I'm getting a strange noise, but...
You alright?
Okay. And so, we're now realizing, which we have neglected, I have to admit, even myself, I didn't pay too much attention to these relief chambers. But now we're looking very carefully there. Because you know the story, of course, there's been a huge scandal with a couple of Germans going up there.
Right, with Dominic Gorlitz, right, in the book.
That's right. I was on the phone with him this morning, by the way. You want to talk to Dominic, by the way. He's a very interesting guy.
Yeah, we'll talk about that, and I definitely want to get an interview, because I remember last time you said, I don't think he's even been interviewed by any Americans yet.
He's been interviewed a lot by German radio, as you can imagine, and on a few European radio, but he hasn't talked in American. And I'll spare the story, because I think you better hear it from the horse's mouth.
Well, you'll help me get him on.
He has quite a story to tell you. I mean, it's an amazing story, which I've narrated in my book, but you really have to hear it from him. I mean, how they got it there.
You'll give me the contact information later, and we'll definitely get him on.
But anyway, to cut a long story short, Dominic went in there, and the very topmost chamber is the most interesting one, because the others, the first 4 chambers, are very low. You have to literally bend to be in them. They're not really chambers as such. I mean, they're cavities, if you like. Very mysterious, because, again, like I said, there's no logic to them. But when you reach the topmost one, it has a gabled roof, so you can actually stand in that chamber. It's very large. It's about 10 meters long and 5 meters wide, so it's quite a large chamber. The last 3 chambers, including this one, is full of graffiti, marks in red ochre paints that was left there by the ancient builders.
Right.
And of course, the famous cartouche with the name of the king in the 5th chamber, the topmost chamber, where the whole controversy was about, as you know from the book. Let me say something that happened in the last few days that I did not say in the book, because it's an ongoing story, and maybe when you interview Dominic, he'll tell you more about this. But
please do.
I've been trying to defend Dominic and his colleague, not because they took samples from there. They did take samples, and the sample taking was admittedly in very unorthodox ways. It's not that they weren't trying to steal anything. It's true. They went there for a very scientific purpose.
Right.
They were confused as to what was allowed. They thought they had a permit. They thought they had a permit because they had asked for one, and they were escorted by inspectors. But in fact, the permit wasn't official. It caused a huge confusion, and they've been accused of stealing. But it's not true. However, what is true is that they did take samples.
Right.
But what is also true, as you know from the book, is that they did not take samples from the cartouche. And this is where I stepped in. I stepped in because I was 100% sure the evidence is irrefutable. We have photographic evidence, we have video evidence. There is no doubt at all that they did not take samples from the cartouche. The samples that were taken from the cartouche had already been taken in 2006.
Right.
Between 2004 and 2000. This is true. So, the big question is, why anybody would want to take samples? Their intention, well, they had taken some samples also from the king's chamber ceiling, because they investigated. I cannot tell you, there is very odd results, very dramatic results that we've been able to test, but I'll let Dominic do this.
Oh, you're a tease, Robert. Give us a little something.
It's not a tease. Well, it's partly a tease, but no, he has to have the privilege to do this. I do not want to.
Of course, no, you don't want to
steal his thunder. No, it's
well, now I definitely have to get him on, because you just teased us like that. Now I got to get the answer to that.
A very dramatic conclusion that is going to surprise everybody. All I can tell you is that what they found in the samples that they took from the kings, you see, we were talking about how they lifted those blocks, how they brought these blocks down, these huge granite blocks to make the ceiling. Well, they took some samples of black markings that were on the edge of these beams, the ceiling beams. This is well known, I mean, it's all over the internet. They confirmed it themselves. And they've had them tested in a very specialized laboratory in Germany. All I can tell you is that the result is totally unexpected.
Oh, does it fit within some of the theories that you're talking about, timing wise, with the pyramid?
Well, not really. What it does fit, I can go as far as
I was trying to get the answer from you if you couldn't tell.
No, believe me, I'm smarter than you think.
Much smarter than me, no doubt about that.
Some people have been trying to get answers from me for years. Okay, no, I can tell you as far that it will explain how these blocks were brought there.
Huh. Interesting.
Which at the moment we have no explanation.
Yeah, because I know there's the theory that there are some acoustical anomalies within the Great Pyramid. So
no, it's nothing to do with that.
Nothing to do with that. Okay. All right. Well, then I'll shut up and I'll just have to talk to Dominic.
Very physical explanation.
Really? Wow. Huh. Yeah. Interesting.
It's something that shouldn't be there, and because it's there, it provides. But I myself have to know a bit more. I can go as far as that because that's as far as he allowed me to say.
All right, I won't push the issue too much, Robert.
But he will reveal this. I mean, but you have to understand there's a process. I mean, they want to be absolutely sure they're having all this examined by
oh, of course. Otherwise, they'll just get, they'll just hear it for decades how, they didn't do everything the right way, and then that'll negate the findings that they did find. So
absolutely.
You got to do it the right process, of course.
The reason they were caught, actually, the reason all this story broke out, is precisely what you just said. Because when you do take samples from somewhere to have it tested somewhere else, you have to, what we call in sample taking, keep the trail. In other words, it's a bit like a detective, when he takes samples from the scene of a crime. He has to make sure that everybody sees him take the samples, put it in a little plastic bag, and the trail to find in the laboratory has to be followed. Otherwise, people will say, how do we know that it is the samples that are being tested that are the ones that you took from the source? Do you understand?
Of course. Of course.
So this is why they literally expose themselves. They actually film themselves taking samples. And this is how the Egyptian authorities jumped on them, because they actually put it on the internet. They wanted people to follow the trail with them, so there is no doubt at all that the samples are from that source. That's it. So that is the first thing they have to make sure. The second thing they have to make sure is that with this kind, especially with the importance of what they're trying to prove, they have to make sure that there is double checking on the tests. This takes a long time.
Of course.
So, because again, it's like DNA testing. It has to be tested at least twice, because people will say, how do we know your first test is correct? So it's well known in science. So they have to go through this whole process. And of course, they need also to think very carefully how they're going to publish this. They're very serious. I mean, Dominic is a scientist. You may be interested to know something about him that a lot of people don't know.
What's that?
His main interest is navigation, ancient navigation. You are probably too young to remember, but there was the famous Kon-Tiki adventure. You remember the Kon-Tiki? No.
Out of hand. Now you're dating me. So.
It's okay to say you don't know. It's all right.
Well, it's so weird because I was just listening to something that mentioned Kon-Tiki last night, but then they didn't really go into it. But please, just.
Kon-Tiki was the name of a raft that was built by Thor Heyerdahl. Thor Heyerdahl, the famous Swedish explorer, navigator, who wanted to prove, this is in the, let me get this right, in the late 60s, he wanted to prove that the people could navigate across the...
Oh yes, that's right, just the way that the ancients did, right?
Yes, that's right. Now, Thor Heyerdahl, I met Thor Heyerdahl, by the way, with Graham Hancock. We met him. He used to live in Spain in the last few years. He lived on the island of Tenerife. Anyway, Thor Heyerdahl died in 2005, I think. And his son took the succession. And his son is working with Dominic, because Dominic is an expert on ancient navigation. Mm-hmm. So they're following in the footsteps of Thor Heyerdahl. They're building at the moment.
Wonderful.
You find him on the if you Google the name of Dominic Gorlitz, and the name. You'll find many websites and YouTubes about his navigation. He's built one to navigate. He's going to try and prove that the Egyptians were able to navigate the Atlantic. So anyway, that's so he's a very interesting guy. He's a scientist. He had no intentions of what the Egyptians accused him of, to prove that Atlantis built the pyramids and all this rubbish.
Yeah, he doesn't.
No. He wanted to do what the Egyptologists should have done years ago.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, it's a bit like, I don't know if you remember the door that was found in the shaft of the Great Pyramid by Rudolf Gantenbrink.
Well, I want to talk about that next. I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, let's be brief, because I know you have to close very soon. Well, let me anticipate your question. This door that was found in '93 by Rudolf Gantenbrink. The same story. Rudolf Gantenbrink was accused of having operated his little miniature robotic machine illegally, that he didn't have permission, and so forth. He did. He did because they allowed him to do it, but then finally, when he made the discoveries, they all jumped up and down saying, no, but we didn't tell him to do this, and they made a big mess out of it. But the reason Rudolf wanted to explore is that he was totally bemused that this particular shaft had been discovered in 1872. That since we've had the technology to be able to look inside it and put a robotic machine and with fiber optic cameras to see what's inside it, was available since the 1950s. No Egyptologist thought of doing it. And finally said, well, I'll do it. I'm a robotic engineer, and I'll do it. The same thing with Dominic. I mean, Dominic well, not just Dominic, we've all been wondering why the Egyptologists would not test certain things in the Great Pyramid, like this graffiti, like the black marks in the ceiling.
Yeah, it makes no sense. They want to date it.
They've been there to prove one way or the other what they are.
Exactly.
So suddenly this scientist said, I'll do it. And he did it, and that's okay, fair enough. But sometimes you have to be bold to get things moving, But he's not a criminal, and it's so sad that they turned it into this political mess. Anyway, this is the story. Getting back to this door that you were going to ask me, well, let me tell you, let's close with this surprise.
Okay.
Because the door was re-investigated after 1993. It was re-investigated, and that I'm sure you remember, by the National Geographic, that drilled a little hole,
right,
and pushed in a fiber optic camera, and they were all surprised that 50 centimeters away from the Gantenbrink door, as we call it now, there was another door.
Yeah.
And that's where the story stopped until 2010. So we're about a few months before the revolution in Egypt. And in 2010, a team from the Leeds University managed to get permission, put up a robot with a fiber optic camera, but this time the fiber optic camera could swivel around.
Right.
To see what was all over the place. And lo and behold, they found two things that explained the curious metal bars, handles that you could see from the Gantenbrink door, from the outside. They found that they were looped inside. Very, very bizarre. I've seen pictures of them. You can see them on the internet.
Yeah, they're in the book too.
But here is the clincher. They found graffiti, red ochre graffiti inscriptions, like the ones that are in the relief chambers. Again, sealed. So this sealed graffiti is very bizarre. But they couldn't explain. There were three signs, clearly a bit faint, but clearly hieroglyphic signs, which, when they were published on the internet, an Italian engineer quickly realized that they were numbers. And the number that they make up, there's three numbers. There's the number 1, there's the number 20, and there's the number 100. Make up the number 121. Now, what's so important about this number is that 121 is the square root of 11. 11 times 11. And that is very interesting.
Why is that so important?
Sorry?
Why is that so important? Tell us why that's so important.
I was about to tell you, Brian. It's so important because the pyramid, the design of the pyramid, is based on that number. You will find that when you study the pyramid as an architect would, and my brother is an architect, has been studying it for years, this number 11 comes up in all its dimensions. Multiples of 11, or 7 by 11, or 14 by 11, and so forth. So it's designed, actually, let me use the right terminology, it's designed on the basis of ratios, ratio numbers, where 11 is the major number, and 11 is a prime number. And it is very often linked to another prime number, 7 in the pyramid. It's well known that the Great Pyramid is designed on a 7 to 11 ratio. This is well known. But here is the weird one. We find this number given in a square of 11 in that little hidden box, if you like, well in the heart of the pyramid, between those two doors. Now, I don't know if you've seen the film Contact. You remember the film Contact?
Yeah, based on Carl Sagan's book.
Right, and the message, you see, the message they get from quote-unquote an alien intelligence is received in prime numbers. In other words, there's no point sending a message to anybody on this planet who doesn't speak your language or understand your language, or want to send a message to a future generation, or a message to another civilization that may exist elsewhere, by using conventional language. What you want to do is use mathematics and astronomy, of course. Astronomy will give directions, and mathematics will speak the universal language. But for those who receive your message, they must know that it is an intelligent message. This is just a noise coming from somewhere that may be mistaken for some sort of message. Which, by the way, as you know, this is what very often happens with the SETI researchers. You know, there's sometimes an excitement, they got a message, and they realize it's background noise.
Right.
But if you get a message with prime numbers, especially prime numbers in sequence, like they did in the film. So, for example, if you hear a bleep, and then 7 bleeps, and then 11 bleeps in a series, you can be absolutely sure that it is a message, and it is an intelligent message. Because the people who are sending it know about prime numbers, and know that they will be interpreted once they're understood. It's a language, if you like. So this is why this discovery of this number hidden behind there, it's like a key, if you like. It's almost telling us, now you've got the key, try and decipher this point. So we've got the astronomy, we've got the mathematics, and now we need to get people to get on trying to decipher, because it is clearly, this pyramid is a gigantic message in stone. And it combines, and I'll have to end it here, it combines with the overall design of the Giza necropolis, which includes the Sphinx, hence why we're writing this book at the moment, because when you look at the overall design from a mathematical and astronomical point of view, you realize that these people who designed it are giving us a date and an address. And I'll leave it there for you, Brian.
Oh, that's a wonderful place to leave it. So, you know, you think that the tomb, it's not the tomb, excuse me, the Great Pyramid, it's a communicative device, and I think the evidence is definitely pointing there. And Robert,
it's a message from the past.
It's a message from the past.
Who sent it? We don't know, but whoever it was extremely intelligent.
Do you think we'll ever be able to decipher it?
I think so, but we must first persuade those who totally are against this to let proper researchers get and study it properly, because it isn't enough to study it from far away. We need to go there and examine, and more research has to be done on those shafts, more research has to be done around the Sphinx. There's a lot to do that we haven't been allowed to do because of this blockage. but I think we're capable of understanding it. But the thing is that we first must realize that it is a message. And this is the effort that I'm putting with Schock and Hancock and the others who have been involved with this. It's very much like the movie. Somebody has to say, look, it's a message. And therefore, we need to understand what it says, because it's a very intelligent message. It's coming from a source that is telling us, look what we can do. I mean, look what we can do. It's there for you to see. You understand?
And
it's a very provocative message. It's a provocative message because the physical legacy is provocative in itself.
And
you know, it's there. It's totally incomprehensible, like I was saying earlier. It is of a magnitude that defies us, and it's telling us. The message is to impress you. Here is what we can do. Now try and understand us. Try and read us. Read the message.
And thankfully, we have people like you and Dr. Schock and Graham Hancock to help us decipher that message, or at least bring us to the cusp of being able to understand it. And that's why I'm such a big fan of your work. You really do an outstanding job, Robert.
Thank you. Well, I'll close it with this. Is that you said something at the beginning of the discussion that is quite true. Any proper investigator, and particularly in this case, you have to follow what we call the Platonic argument. In other words, you have to go where the evidence takes you, no matter how uncomfortable it is. And this has been the problem with Egyptologists. When they feel uncomfortable with the evidence, they disregard it because it doesn't fit their world, if you like, their consensus world. But we don't do this. We don't do this. And if the message is taking us somewhere where, yes, we will be blamed as being too speculative or too adventurous, well, let it be, because this is where it's going. And again, I want to stop it there because I don't want to say too much, because I have to be surprised when I write the book as well. Huh?
Yeah, we don't want to give it all away. You still got to sell some books. You got to make some living here, Robert. Well, I just want to say thank you so much, Robert, for coming on the show and really taking time out of your schedule after some of the issues that we had. So I really can't be thankful enough to you.
It's been a pleasure. Well, let me know when you actually have it on the air so I can pass it on to some friends.
Wonderful. It's actually going to air tonight. So and then I'll have it on my website and YouTube and all that good stuff. So I'll send you the link.
Wait, can you send me the link? Because I'll put it on my Facebook. I have a lot of people there and they'd like to listen to it.
Wonderful. And did you want to send out or give out your social media sites before we let you go?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, might as well, since we have you, and then I'll let you go.
Medias, my website is www.robertboval.co.uk. I emphasize .co.uk and not .com. If you go to .com, you're going to get a surprise. Somebody cannibalized the site and is putting all sorts of weird things on it. So
yes,
.com, right?
That's what they do.
And,
so
you'll find everything there: my books, my articles, links to my tours, and so forth. And let me just say again, I want to advertise this a little bit, that I'm working with Robert Schock. I'm very pleased to do that. Schock is one of the great researchers in this field, and we're putting our heads together to nail the last coffin on this debate.
I can't wait. And we'll have to have you back on when that comes out. I can't wait.
Okay, hasta la vista, as we say from here.
All right, Robert, I will be in touch very soon. Enjoy your day. It's a little bit nicer where you are.
It's a pleasure. Bye.
Bye, Robert. The one, the only, Robert Boval, talking about his latest book, Secret Chamber Revisited, The Quest for the Lost Knowledge of Ancient Egypt. And if you want some information about him, links to his website, you can go to our website, themindseyemedia.com. Next week, join us again. We'll keep the mysteries coming as we talk with returned guest Jean-Louis DeBiase, a 32nd degree Freemason who's also the president of the Esoteric Masonic Club. We're going to talk about his book, Secrets and Practices of the Freemasons. And if you want in on a little secret, I am actually a 3rd degree Mason. So it's going to be an amazing discussion. We're going to give you the true origins of Freemasonry, a little more information on Freemasonry and the founding fathers of America, some little things you might not know, and sacred symbolism. It's going to be a great one. So for John's info, once again, check the upcoming schedule, news, social media links, the whole works, mindseyemedia.com, themindseyemedia.com. And as always, the show would be nothing without you, the listener, so I just want to show my appreciation. Thanks so much for listening. Join me again next week, February 3rd, 2015. I'm your host, Brian Turnov. This is The Mind's Eye on Z